Hello and welcome to the episode of In the Trench with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today we are joined by Alex from the Boys in the Big Apple podcast and his own podcast as well called The Big Blue in the Bronx. Alex, thanks for coming on. How's it going, man?
Well, it's going well. Obviously, the Giants just came off a victory, and it's always no matter how good the Jets are, how good the Giants
Yep.
are, seeing these two teams always come together, and the rivalry. Even though Aaron Rodgers is not playing, and we had that little scrum in the summer,
Yep.
it's still going to be very much fun. And I'll be at the game this weekend in the press box. So I appreciate you having me on. I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, looking forward to getting into it, all angles from obviously the Jets and obviously getting your Giants perspective on this one. You nailed it right on the head. Anytime these two teams meet, crosstown rivals, the battle in New York, it is always an exciting matchup. And, especially because they don't see each other very much because they're in the two different conferences, obviously, as we all know. I just wanted to get your thoughts to open things up here before we get into the offense, defense for both teams and what to expect. What are your overall thoughts from the Giants this season? Again, coming off the win against the, Commanders, which was a must-win game for them at home against a team that they've handled pretty well over the last couple of years. And in your thoughts from a Giant fan of the Jets this season, where they sit at 500, which a lot of us Jet fans are pretty happy with, given that they lost Aaron Rodgers 4 snaps into the season. What are your thoughts on both these teams heading into this Week 8 matchup?
Yeah, so I'll start with my Giants. I mean, the overall scope on the season is we knew that the schedule was going to be very hard,
Yep.
but you can't at all predict what challenges you're going to face, what challenges you may or may not overcome. Obviously, we've been faced with the fact that our starting quarterback is hurt. I don't think he's going to play this week. Our starting left tackle's hurt. We don't know if he's going to play this week. It looks like JMS, our center, is going to be back this week, and a lot of
Mhm.
different challenges this overall season. And I believe this is a must-win game for the Giants, definitely coming off that Commanders win because your defense, both defenses are really good. I'll say
Yeah.
that right now. But the Giants' defense over the last 2 weeks has really done really well. I think they've given up 21 points in the last two games, which is really good. Really one off of a muff on special teams. But anyway,
Yeah.
this is a must-win game for the New York Giants if you want to rejuvenate your season. This is the softer part of the schedule, despite what a lot of people think. You got the Jets, you got the Raiders, you got a couple of the teams coming up. But the Giants need to punch it in the end zone a couple of times over the next few weeks, and it's going to be interesting to see if they can do it this week because going into that Jets standpoint, Jets have a very good defense. They've had a very good defense under
Yeah.
Jeff Ulbrich, especially the last 2 years. And my thoughts on the New York Jets. I was watching the game. We were calling the game on our channel when Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers went down. It was sad to see. And you know what? I'm not a Jet fan. Obviously, I'm a Giant fan, and me and my brother always fight about it because he's a Jets fan. But I went to one of the practices where Aaron Rodgers was there, and this was
Yeah.
actually the joint practice against the Bucks, and you could just feel like the whole Jets fan base rally behind him, and he was
Mhm.
taking in New York really well. And it's just sad to see him come off the field like that. They still won the game, and I I am shocked a little bit that they are standing at a good record at 3-3. They beat the Eagles to everyone's shock. They stayed in with Kansas City, and the defense is fine. I think the pass rush
Yeah.
is one of the things to fear this week for the New York Giants. I think the secondary is a little shaky. I mean, statistically, but also you guys have played your fair share of zone defense. But the offense, as far as the Jets go, I think it's going to really be really up to Zach Wilson. I think the offensive line has done enough. I know Robert Sala's reconfigured that offensive line a little bit with Becton, the left tackle, and a couple other guys. But Zach Wilson, I think he's going to have to do a little bit more to beat the Giants this week, and he has to be in his own game because I know, and I think you know as well, Bubbs, that Wink Martindale is going to be coming for
Yep.
his head.
Yeah, those blitzes are going to be coming flying at Zach Wilson, and especially because Zach Wilson does not handle the blitz very well, and that's going to definitely be something to watch. And you mentioned it; we all kind of feel the same way. This is really going to be a battle of the defense. It's going to be a low-scoring game. Whoever can grind out that turnover, that late drive in the game could potentially decide this game. But I wanted to hear a little bit more of your thoughts here as we start on the offense side of the football for the Giants. The offensive line's been a major issue. It seems to be getting better the last 2 weeks. Do you feel that is just the change at quarterback with Daniel Jones obviously dealing with the injury? Tyrod Taylor will be in. We'll get to that here in a second. But what have you been your thoughts on this offense line? Do you feel it's more injuries? Is it just bad play, coaching? Why has the offense line struggled so much? And do you feel they might be turning it around with some of these guys getting healthier?
It's all the above, really. It's
Yeah.
really all the above. The first few weeks of the season, I'll give the last 2 weeks credit because our weakness, the O line, was actually the strength of the last 2 weeks, and I'll get to
Yeah.
that in a second. But I'm still kind of iffy about our O line coach Bobby Johnson because we saw Evan Neal not getting better. And obviously he made that comment, which made all of us mad, including myself. But he wasn't getting better. Josh Azudu wasn't getting better, though he was playing left tackle. And injuries, I mean, that was a big one. Because if you look at the starting offensive line right now, as far as I see it, we don't know if Evan Neal's going to play on Sunday. I presume he would, because that's a good week of rest that he had sitting out against the Commanders. But most of it's offensive guards playing tackle. Justin Pugh, we drafted him a long time ago. And, he was drafted as a tackle, but he was transitioned to play guard, and he played guard in Arizona once he moved on from us as well. Ben Bredesen, he's a guard. He's going to be playing center or left guard. JMS is expected to be back this week. And Mark Lewinsky, he stepped up really well over the last 2 weeks. And you think, oh, well, against the Bills interior and the interior of the Commanders, those are two really tough interiors. But our interior on the other side stepped up as well. Marcus McKeithen, he's a 5th-round pick. I don't know if he'll play this week because of the in-and-out rotations. And as far as that goes, he's not really that good. I'm going to be honest. He's a backup in this league. He still doesn't know how to get his hands on somebody. And Tyree Phillips, I think he's a guard. They probably will trot him at tackle this week if Evan Neal can't go. But my problem with him is a little bit of the footwork and speed, because Andrew Thomas, I mean, there's not many people like Andrew Thomas athlete-wise. But Tyree Phillips, he just doesn't have that same speed. And you guys have a ton of edge rushers, notably on who's going to be standing on Tyree Phillips' side, Bryce Huff. So to categorize the O-line overall, I mean, it's just been injuries, it's been coaching, it's been personnel in and out swaps. And one of the things I would like to just pick somebody's brain about is, A, where's the leadership? B, how do you guys really gel? Because we're going to get into our 8th combination this week, whether we like it or not. So those are just my thoughts. And, I think there's quarterback play has to do a little bit with it. I think Tyrod Taylor, I think the offensive line has gotten better, but I think Tyrod Taylor manipulates the pocket a little bit better because he hasn't been in there as much. He hasn't been taking as many hits, though his sack rate is higher in his career, where Daniel Jones, I believe, was shell-shocked. And Tyrod's taking risks. Daniel Jones really wasn't, because I think the shell shock.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned, Justin Pugh, the funny Sunday Night Football, Justin Pugh straight off the couch was definitely something all football fans were able to laugh at and try and find some joy out of a rough situation. What do you feel this offensive line needs to do? Who do you feel is the biggest X factor and biggest thing that they need to do this week to stop? You mentioned Bryce Huff, Jermaine Johnson, Quinn Williams, all those guys that this Jet defense brings at opposing teams. What do they need to do you feel, to combat this fierce Jets pass rush?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things. So I think the miracle, I can't say it's a miracle, because at least last week it was announced that maybe he'd come back this week. The biggest thing this offensive line could use is Andrew Thomas, because the quarterback, I mean, Daniel Jones is probably not playing this week, but Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor, you always feel comfortable with more blindside protection. And it's not that Justin Pugh has, been great. He's been, god awful. He hasn't been good, because he's a guard playing left tackle, and he hadn't played left tackle since I think it was the Jets game in 2015. That's 8 years ago. So that just, tells you where he's at. And if Justin Pugh plays at left tackle, you got to give him some tight end protection. I mean, Darren Waller's not really that type of guy. Maybe you call up somebody from the practice squad, because we only have 2 tight ends on the roster right now, but they'll probably use one of those elevations. You could use the extra tackle sometimes in a max protect situation, but the problem is you're sending maybe 2-3 receivers out on routes, and you're relying on separation. But I would give Pugh tight end help. I think Tyree Phillips could probably stand his own against Bryce Huff. JMS coming back this week is big for his growth. As I mentioned before, Ben Bredesen and Mark Lewinsky have really stepped up the last 2 weeks against some really good interiors. So doubling Quinn Williams, a lot of people, maybe in the Giant land are not looking at Quentin Jefferson, who's the leading sacker on the New York Jets with, I believe, 3 or 3.5 right now. And well, I mean, just it's gonna be really tough. As I said, it gets so much better when you talk about maybe Andrew Thomas returning, because he's at left tackle. Then you have a multitude of things where you could place Neal at guard if he's healthy. You could place Pugh at right tackle. You could switch that up. So, I mean, obviously the combos are going to be very interesting to see what they come up with this week. But tight end protection, getting out the ball quick, and also having a running game. The Giants, they've gotten better in pass protection situations in the last 2 weeks. They have not been able to run the football on a consistent basis. And I think the Jets are one of the lower ranked run defenses. I would try to see what you can do with that.
Yeah, definitely. Your last point there with the Jets, one of our weaknesses is the run defense and stopping mobile quarterbacks, which is what we'll get to next. So a little bit of a two-parter here. Number one, Who do you think plays quarterback this week for the New York Giants? And who would you rather / who matches up better, do you feel, against this Jet defense? Tyrod Taylor or Daniel Jones?
So I'm gonna take a guess out there, and I'm gonna say that Tyrod Taylor plays this week. Neck injury. We've seen that rodeo with Daniel Jones before about 2 years
Mhm.
ago, and he was out for the entire season basically. And not that he'll be out the entire season this year, as he said, it's a little bit. It's not as extreme as it was 2 years ago, but I don't think he's going to play this week. I don't think there's a force to play him this week because whether it's sad to say or whatever people's thoughts are on it is, Tyrod Taylor's putting up a little bit more production than Daniel Jones and Jones is. And honestly, I might prefer Tyrod Taylor this week in any given situation over Daniel Jones because, there's some things that Jones can do that Taylor can't, and some things that Taylor can and Jones can't. Either other way around, I should say. But
Mhm.
I would probably prefer Tyrod this week because at least I would say the offensive line looks just slightly subpar.
Yeah.
He knows the group he's working with. He's not shell shocked, and he's taking risks. And I would like to see Olbrich's approach to see whether he plays more man or zone defense. And if they play zone defense, I would like to see Tyrod manipulate the pocket and throw to the holes in that zone defense because we know Wandale is pretty good with that. We know that Jalen Hyatt obviously loves to go deep and stuff like that. So if my preference was based on this week, I would go Tyrod Taylor personally.
Yeah, it seems that's definitely seems to be the consensus among all Giants fans, and he's obviously looked a lot better than Daniel Jones. You mentioned a little about Jalen Hyatt. Everyone was talking about the Jalen Hyatt sauce play in the preseason. Do you Do you expect to see that matchup a lot on Sunday? Are you looking forward to that matchup? As a Jet fan, I obviously you're going to be pulling for Hyatt. We'll all be pulling for Sauce. Do you feel that was something that you think Hyatt can do this week, or do you feel that was just one play? But what are your expectations going into this week overall as well, just on how these Giants receivers match up against these Jet corners, assuming DJ Reed and Sauce both clear protocols?
Yeah, and I actually have a little bit of question for you, Bubbs, because I'm having Matt O'Leary on tomorrow for the Saturday pod, and I'm going to ask him the same
Nice.
question. But I'm going to go back to the preseason when all that happened, and I know the Jeff fans are like, "Who cares?" It's an incomplete pass, and Giant fans are like, "Oh, Jalen Hyatt and all this stuff." So I took it like, "Hey, it's preseason. It's a good
Yeah.
sign for the Rook." But at the end of the day, the play doesn't count, and it doesn't really count even that he catches it anyway because it's in the preseason. Um, so I'm gonna say it's not gonna be like a consistent matchup. So if anyone's out there that's gonna say, okay, I'm looking for Sauce and Hyatt,
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be 100% of the time or all that sort of stuff. Because the way I look at Jalen Hyatt this season, at least based on the way they've used him in two separate games, that being last week against the Cardinals, it's two of our wins. But it just seems like he's not going to be, at least this season. Again, it's part of his development that he's probably going to be just that big chunk play guy. 3 catches, 90
Mhm.
yards, 3 catches, 80 yards, something like that. I mean, again, 2 catches last week for 75, and I think 2 catches for 80 or 90 something against Arizona, and obviously some catches in between. So you may see a play where Tyrod Taylor goes deep to Hyatt, and maybe Hyatt makes the catch. Maybe it's an incomplete pass broken up by Sauce Gardner. But I wouldn't say that's like a not that it is, but I'm just comparing like the template. Not that it's
Mhm.
going to be a Josh Norman OBJ matchup, but Hyatt against Sauce. I mean, it's not going to be as regularly consistent. I can only predict. I don't know how many shots they're going to take downfield, but
Yeah.
also like Darius Slayton, he's been decent over the last few weeks, and I'm interested to see also Michael Carter versus Wandale Robinson because Wandale Robinson's a bit of a tweener, but we saw that big play he had last week for 22 yards after the catch, and he was breaking some tackles. And my question for you, Bubbs, is
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on the way Salah's been handling injuries?
It's not good. I'll tell you that. Anytime he says, Salah's just weird, and I got to give Salah a lot of credit because this team easily could have flopped the second Aaron Rodgers went down. We could be talking about the 1-5 Jets going into this game as opposed to a 500 team, but that doesn't take away from the injuries. Anytime he says something good, it's always bad. And this whole the handling of the injuries it hasn't made sense to me. It's been the case ever since he, obviously was hired back in 2021. The Sauce DJ Reed concussion thing confuses me because this is now going on 3 weeks with DJ Reed because he missed that Denver game, missed last week, or missed Philly, and then he had a bye week. So we're way farther into even the fact that he should still be in protocol. Sauce, it's 2 weeks. Usually concussions are about 1 to 2 weeks. Not that that's all Sal's control, but it still confuses me as to why this is happening. Even had the Sauce where he said he was dealing with an illness on that Friday. The next day he came out with concussion. His handling of injuries has definitely been frustrating for fans because anytime he says something positive, it is the complete opposite. And I just wish you got a little bit more honesty out of him. That's my feeling. Would you agree from, an outside perspective that it's not a good look? I mean, it's been thrown around in the media. It's a tough look for sure. Anytime he says anything good, it's always bad. And it's frustrating.
I mean, not that Brian Dable's been 100% with sometimes it's gamesmanship, and I think sometimes us Giant fans can see that. But the way I'm looking at the Jets thing is, he said on Monday, and he also said, Wednesday, I think the injury report came out that DJ Reed and Sauce were full practicing and all that sort of stuff. And then I think there was the Mekhi Becton thing, the Dwayne Brown thing. When he went on IR, they said, oh, he's going to play, but then he goes on IR. It's that's interesting gamesmanship. Even though it's really not, but I wouldn't trust Saleh with injuries. If I was a Jeff fan, I wouldn't trust Saleh with the word of injuries. I would just say, okay, my expectations are very low.
Yeah, just wait to see who the guys are out there on Sunday and whatever that is, then that's the case. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned even the Becton stuff. I mean, you go back to even year one with him where he said, oh, Becton will be back 4 to 6 weeks, and Becton ended up missing the entire season. Not all that was on Saleh, obviously, but it's definitely been something that as Jeff fans, we've scratched our head over a lot of these press conferences and the injury updates a lot. So moving on here, one more player on the offense that seems to be breaking out a little bit for you guys. And the Jets last year struggled against tight ends. This year, they've actually done a much better job against tight ends this season. Your thoughts on Darren Waller? The last 2 to 3 weeks, he's really been a lot better. Last week, obviously, scored his first touchdown against the Commanders. Do you feel this is the start of something for him after being dealt in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so. He's shown his flashes. There was a little bit of the Giants fan base that said after 3-4 weeks that, Darren Waller's washed. I never really was part of that conversation because the offense wasn't consistent enough, whether it's the offensive line playing a part or the quarterback playing a part. I thought it was both, and getting him the ball. And, the same could be said for all the guys in the offense, Jalen Hyatt not getting the ball and some of these other guys not getting the ball. But I think that Darren Waller is himself from the Raiders time, how many years he spent with the Raiders. No, I don't. I think he's lost a step, but I still think he's impactful. Obviously last week he had the touchdown and also he had some good plays over the middle of the field. And I think that's, picking apart the zones, the thing we talked about with Wan'Dale Robinson a couple of seconds ago, because the Jets do play a heavy zone defense. Sometimes they'll play man. But I think that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. And, one of the guys I'm looking at, I don't know if he particularly covers the tight ends, is Quincy Williams. He's been one of the faster players on the Jets defense this year. And a lot of Jet fans were very interested to see what he would do coming off of last year. And then they signed him to a one-year contract because his brother is on the team. And he's been playing at a really fast pace, arguably, possibly Pro Bowl. So I'll be interested to see if it's going to be him on Darren Waller or it's going to be Jordan Whitehead on Darren Waller. But I don't think it's going to be a big Darren Waller week, despite him leading in receiving yards 2 weeks in a row. I could be wrong.
Yeah, and you obviously mentioned the point with Quincy Williams. I think that's been one of the things with the Jets where we've been a lot better in covering tight ends is Quincy Williams' play has elevated. Even Mosley, although he's had some couple rough coverage plays and he has dropped a couple interceptions, he had a pick against Mahomes, and him and Quincy Williams are both right up there in the league among linebackers in coverage grade and overall grade. I mean, they're definitely one of the best 1-2 linebacker combos in football right now. They've been great, and that's been a big key to our success. So moving on to the defense, once again, we're talking to Alex from the Big Blue in the Bronx podcast. What have been your thoughts, again, aside from, we mentioned a little bit about the blitzing, but what have been your thoughts from this Giants defense as a whole this year, both pass and against the run? Because, the Jets, we talk, the running back matchup's a big one, Saquon versus Breece Hall. How do you expect the Giants to go into this matchup, run and pass, but specifically that Breece Hall matchup, which is definitely a storyline to watch?
Yeah, so for the first 3 weeks, it was a matter of frustration. And it was also a matter of not getting the opportunities. Week one, I couldn't grade them fairly because the defense was constantly
Mhm.
put in bad position due to turnovers, special teams play, all that sort of just mopped in. Week two wasn't good. They shut out the Cardinals in the second half, but week two wasn't good when you give up, what was it, 20, 28 points in the first half against the Cardinals out of all teams. Frustrating. Week three, they couldn't tackle, but they held up decent against San Fran. Week four, I can't really count that because you got 7 points awarded to a Daniel Jones pick six. Week five, you give up 500 plus yards to Miami Dolphins. Xavier McKinney comes out with a quote basically saying, we can't blame the defense anymore, though you gave up 500 yards and over 30 points to a very dynamic offense. Um, so there's that. Week six, they play very, very well. I still am a little frustrated that they can't get to the passer. They didn't get to Josh Allen at all, but they did pick him off. They got 2 turnovers there, and one of the biggest things coming into what was it, week five, week six was the lack of turnovers. And
Mhm.
last 3 weeks they've had turnovers, which is a good thing. Week six, as I mentioned, week seven they got to howl so many times, and they played really well. They were a little bit bend but don't break in the second half, but I'm fine with that because the offense couldn't put up points against Brees Hall. I'm not as threatened by him as most, and that's not really because of Brees Hall. I've watched Brees Hall. He's an explosive running back. I thought that was a steal in the second round for the Jets.
Yeah.
My problem is Zach Wilson's a quarterback, and there's a lot of predictability with the play calling. Like a lot of the times I will see first and second down runs, and then you guys are set up for like a third and long situation, which most defensive coordinators, including Wink Martindale, will feast in that situation, whether it's blitzing, whether it's playing zone coverage and just allowing the underneath passes. So if they're less predictable about the runs and maybe they get something going against the pass, which is hopefully something that I don't want to see. But if they get something going against the pass, they'll be less predictable with the run. But
Mhm.
overall, I think Brees Hall is a weapon. I think him and Garrett Wilson are really the face of that offense. But I just think I think the predictability is a bad thing for the Jets offense because Hackett first and second down running plays, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of teams stack the box against the Jets, and it's forced us in some tough spots. Hackett's play calling by far has got to be better, and the red zone too for the Jets offense. I mean, it's been abysmal. 5 for 17 on the season in the red zone. Third down conversion's got to be a lot better. But again, first and second down, we've taken a lot of early down penalties. We've had a lot of those second down, as you mentioned, had a lot of those second down 8 runs. A couple with Dalvin Cook where they go nowhere. You set up a third down and 8, third down and 7, which isn't putting Zach in a good spot, especially against this defense obviously led by Wink. So I wanted to get into one player for the New York Giants. Popped up in the news this week because they had some stuff going on WFAN and the radio, which some of the stuff these days that comes out of there is a little questionable. But yeah, the whole Kayvon Thibodeau debate. 5.5 sacks this year. That's more than he had all of last season. What have been your thoughts on Thibodeau this year? Do you see progress? Have you been impressed? Again, he dropped the interception, but outside of that, what have been your thoughts from him this season with some of the noise around him over the last 24, 48 hours?
Yeah, so I mean, I saw the whole segment with Carl Banks and the
Yeah.
two bald heads on WFAN, and do I completely agree with Carl Banks? No, I don't, and I'll get to that in a second. Um, I thought the way the two bald heads handled it was childish, and I also thought that it was a lack of analyzation in their game because argument wins over noise, evidence wins over noise. They were noisy. That doesn't win an argument. But anyway,
Mhm.
my thoughts: 5.5 sacks. Obviously, that leads the team. That's very good, right? He had, I think, one and a
Yep.
half or two last game, and he's had some interesting plays and whatnot. Now, that's good. He's gotten better over the last few weeks. My problem with him is he's fifth overall pick worthy, or was drafted because he was supposedly fifth overall pick worthy. And you look at some of these other guys in draft classes, whether they were selected at 3, 4, 5, top 10 players, and they were maybe more explosive in their second year. And I get it.
Yep.
Listen, um, I'm not expecting Kayvon to get double digit sacks, believe it or not, because Wink's defense, you don't really get double digit sacks. I think Matt
Mhm.
Judon may have done that once. I think the highest he had in Wink's defense was maybe 9 or 10. But I'm looking for him to be an impact player, like not just, be there when a sack is to come and maybe the quarterback's running out and just grab him. I'm talking about win your plays at the line of scrimmage,
Yep.
rushing the passer, and playing against the run because I mean, and most of the glimpses that people have gotten of the Giants defense this season is that they're not very good defending the run. Like you could go back to Buffalo, they didn't allow a lot
Mhm.
of yards, but James Cook, he had 5.1 yards per carry. That's not going to get it done. Last week, I mean, they gave up some big run plays, but it wasn't really like that bad. I don't think they had a carry over 10, 17 yards, something like that.
Mhm.
But mostly this in terms of Kayvon Thibodeau, he needs to be more of an impact player. And I think by year's end, I don't think this is too hard of a expectation to have on him, but he needs to be a player that defenses game plan against. And I know sometimes he gets double teamed or gets covered up by tight ends, but you got to beat those tight ends. I mean, you were drafted number 5 for a reason. Would like to see a little bit more impact out of him, but I think there is growth compared to the first, say, 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely, definitely is interesting to hear all those, the conversation on WFN and all that stuff. But yeah, the 5.5 sacks, it's been solid. And I definitely agree with you, just from an outside fan perspective. I think you're still waiting to see him really, develop into that high end pick that they drafted him to be. But again, the Wink Martindale system, and a lot of people have brought that up, not a big sack system where you're going to see these big 13, 14 sack season out of guys and going to be up there in the top of the league. We talked a little about the Giants secondary versus the Jets or the Jets secondary versus the Giants receivers. What is your expectations for this Giants secondary? Tay Banks coming off a solid game against this Jet receiving core.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't really see any threats too much out of this jet receiving core other than Garrett Wilson.
Yeah.
Lazard's decent. Randall Cobb's washed. I saw some stats. I think it was JetCast. It was someone else put it up like that. He's worse than run blocking. He's worse than like drop percentage. He's washed. And the fact that they still traded McCole Hardman when he didn't get any snaps is a little weird. I know Xavier Gibson's becoming more of that McCole Hardman part of the offense because he's getting some end arounds and stuff like that. So I guess Xavier Gibson's speed and Garrett Wilson's explosiveness, I think those are two things to look for. I do have the confidence that I think Deontay Banks can at least do a solid job on Garrett Wilson. Is he going to totally 100% lock him down? No, he's going to get his fair share of yards. But I think at the end of the day, when you consider who's the quarterback, when you consider a couple other different things, how much impact it has, I think you'll say maybe Deontay Banks has won this matchup. But you know what? If Garrett Wilson roasts him a couple of times, he roasts him a couple of times. To be honest with you, Bubbs, I'm more confident in Deontay Banks covering Garrett Wilson than I am Adoree Jackson. I mean,
Mhm.
Adoree Jackson is coming off an injury. Deontay Banks has shown his growth. I think he could be a number one in this league. And I know everyone's going to look at the stats from last week and say, hey, Terry McLaurin got 90 yards. But if you look at those first 3 quarters, I mean, he had Terry McLaurin on lockdown. And that's a good thing as well that Wink wasn't scared to blitz because he had his number one corner out. He obviously trusted his defense in that situation. So, and so that would probably leave, I would say, Adoree against Lazard, though they might put Adoree against Wilson. And then in the slot, probably Gibson versus Cordell Flott, who's been really solid, really quiet too. But I'm looking forward to that. I think that's actually the top match I'm looking forward to in this game is Wilson and Deontay Banks. But I think they'll
Yeah.
have their fair share of wins and losses.
Yeah, definitely. And this Jet receiving core, I just like to say this because I think the Jets, as yet approach the deadline, it's interesting where they're at. 500. If they can get this win, you're 4-3. You start to feel really good with the Chargers and Raiders coming up. We got rid of McCole Hardman. We got rid of, or we expected to get rid of Carl Lawson here within the coming days with the emergence of Bryce Huff and Jermaine Johnson. Carl Lawson has been a non-factor. I would like to see Joe Douglas because this team is in contention. I want to see Joe Douglas go out and make moves. We're getting rid of everybody. But if you're talking about Xavier Gibson being this really solid piece, let's see him out there. We've seen him very minimal. He had the one jet sweep play, I believe it was 2 weeks ago. I think Denver game. I think we saw it. Before the Philly game. Get him involved. Even Jason Brownlee, another undrafted free agent, had a great camp. Get him involved. Randall Cobb. I mean, he's washed. Outside of the 2-point conversion catch he had from Zach against Philly, he hasn't been good. Lazard's solid. Garrett Wilson, as we all know, you give him a quarterback. I mean, this guy can be elite and has shown what he can do already with the quarterbacks that he has dealt with. They got to go out and make some moves. Cortland and somebody, Hunter Renfro. This team is too good, too much in contention to just sell everybody off and not make any moves. Receiver, Corey Davis' retirement definitely hurt, but Joe Douglas has got to make some moves here. That's one of my biggest like things going into this deadline. Everyone's like, oh, trade this guy, get picks for this guy. We're in contention. Make a move. Bring in somebody. There's guys out there. Hunter Renfroe, Cortland Sutton, Judy. They know the system. They were under Hackett last year. Although it was a disaster, they know the system. They can come right in. All those, some of those pieces, even Marquise Brown from Arizona, there's guys out there. I would like to see them make some moves because outside of Garrett Wilson, he needs some help, and you'd also benefit Zach Wilson. And if Rodgers ever comes back, well, you give him some more weapons. So to close things out here, what is your prediction for this matchup? And where can everybody find you, all the great content that you're putting out there?
Yeah, so as far as a prediction goes, I am going to pick the Giants to win this one. I'm going to say something like 17-13. This is not going to be high scoring, as you mentioned, Bubbs. Where can everybody find me? Of course, got the YouTube channel, Big Blue in the Bronx. Do a lot of different shows on there, a lot of different live streams, so it's content all sorts of the week. Baseball off season's coming, so we're going to do a lot of that stuff too. And the podcast that I do, which is the Big Blue in the Bronx podcast, which is covering the Giants, you can find that on YouTube and, of course, Apple Podcasts, where you can give us a 5-star rating.
Yeah, definitely go check them out. A lot of content, as you mentioned, baseball off season coming up here for the Yankees, who I don't even know what to expect at this point with them. Maybe Soto, maybe we can dream. Who knows? We'll see. But that is Alex from the Big Blue in the Bronx podcast. Definitely go check out all of his content. Does great work over there. We'll have a lot more content coming up throughout the next upcoming days as we get ready for Sunday's matchup, Jets-Giants at MetLife Stadium. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned. A lot more content coming your way, and thanks for watching.